Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're tackling something pretty specific, actually. It's about cracking the BICSI DCDC certification exam, but for folks who are already deep in the game.
Yeah, we're talking about experienced pros, right? People who've spent years, actually building data centers, leading ICT projects, doing the design work. They know their stuff in practice.
Exactly. And our sources for this deep dive, they really zero in on the strategies for that group. It's not about learning Data Center 101. You guys listening probably live and breathe that daily.
hmm The real trick, and what the sources focus on, is translating all that hands-on, real-world knowledge into the very specific format and language that a standardized test like the DCDC demands. It's a different skill.
Right. So that's our mission today. Pull out the key tactical steps. How do you take that practical expertise you've got and, well, make it work for the test itself, beyond just knowing the material?
Let's dive in.
Okay, so the first big thing, you kind of touched on it, is facing that core challenge head on. You've been in the trenches, making decisions, designing, troubleshooting. Your knowledge is practical, tested. But how do you align that with what BICSI expects on paper?
Well, yeah, this is where experience can sometimes be a bit of a funny thing, almost a hurdle if you're not aware. Your methods, they obviously work, right? You prove them. But they might not line up perfectly with the exact wording or the standardized procedure BICSI lays out.
So the standard might have a specific term or sequence.
Exactly. And the sources are clear. The starting point has got to be the official exam blueprint. You need to download that thing. It's your roadmap.
Okay, got the blueprint. It lists all the objectives. What then? How do you actually use it to find where you need to focus?
So you go through it, objective by objective. And for each one, you stop and really ask yourself, okay, how do I actually handle this in my job? What steps do I take? What factors do I consider? What language do I use?
Right, your real world process.
Yeah. Then you look at how BICSI defines that same objective in their standards, in their materials.
Mm.
And you look for the differences. Where does your method, or even just the terminology you use, diverge, even slightly,
Yeah.
from the official BICSI definition?
Ah, okay, so those little points of difference.
Those are your study zones. That's where you need to focus. It's not about relearning everything. It's about calibrating, like translating your expert knowledge into their specific language,
Makes sense. It's precision work, not starting over, adapting what you already know deeply.
which kind of leads nicely into the second step, which is how you actually use the DCDC manual
Hmm.
and the sources. They hammer this home. If you're experienced, this manual is not a textbook you read end to end.
Right, definitely not light reading. So what is it then?
Think of it like any other critical technical reference you use day to day, like the NEC or maybe a specific vendor standard or, some regulatory doc.
You don't memorize the whole code book.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. You need to know how to navigate it, how to find the specific piece of information you need for this particular problem fast. That's precisely how you should approach the DCDC manual.
So it's less about memorization and more about efficient retrieval, knowing the structure.
That's it, knowing where to look.
Yeah.
The skill is being able to find and apply the information quickly, not having every single detail memorized.
Okay.
And a pro tip that comes up is actively building a kind of mental map of the manual.
A mental map.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
knowing roughly where the big sections are. Okay, electrical systems, that's probably in this part. Fire suppression standards are covered over here.
Yeah.
Cabling types, redundancy models, like tier levels.
Yeah.
You get a feel for the layout.
So when a question pops up, either in practice or the real exam,
Your brain kind of automatically points you to the right chapter, the right neighborhood in the manual, so you can quickly grab that specific standard or detail you need. Saves a ton of time.
okay, that makes sense. And using the manual that way feels much more aligned with how experts actually work, which segues perfectly into the third key area. According to the sources, this is often where the rubber really meets the road, mastering those scenario-based questions.
Oh yeah, the scenarios. You can't avoid them, and frankly, they're designed to test application right, to see if you can take the standards and apply them to, well, reasonably realistic situations, just like you do in your job.
So less recall, more application.
Exactly. And the sources suggest a really neat little framework. Just 3 words to structure your thinking when you hit one of these. Consult, justify, optimize.
Consult, justify, optimize. Okay, unpack that. How does that work when you're looking at a test question?
So think of it like a mini project brief or a client request.
Yeah.
First, consult the scenario. Really read it carefully. What's the actual problem here? What's the core requirement or the client's need that they're describing? Don't just jump to an answer.
Okay, understand the real need first. Got it. Then justify.
Then you justify. Based on that need you identified, you start forming a potential solution in your head. But here's the crucial part.
Mm.
You have to explicitly back it up. Why is this the right answer? And the justification have to come from the BICSI standards or guidelines. You're essentially using the manual or your calibrated knowledge of the manual to prove your choice.
Anchoring it to the standard. Makes sense. And the last one, optimize. That sounds like bringing in the practical constraints.
That's exactly it. This is where you layer on those other critical factors that always come into play in the real world. Things like cost. What are the budget implications? Space, do we have the physical room? What about the specific redundancy level they need? Or, future-proofing, how scalable is this solution?
So it adds that layer of real-world refinement.
Right. By running the scenario through that consult, justify, optimize process, you're basically turning what could feel like a tricky, abstract test question into a structured problem-solving approach that you, as an experienced pro, already understand. But it's grounded in the standards they're testing you on.
That framework sounds super useful, turning it into a familiar process. Now, step 4. This is something I think experienced folks might sometimes think, I don't need that as much. Using mock exams, not just to see a score, but really as a feedback tool.
Yeah, the sources are emphatic on this. They are like non-negotiable. Seriously, doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this, you have to take practice exams.
And not just casually clicking through.
No. Full simulations. The recommendation is at least 2 full-length ones. We're talking the full 100 questions, the 2.5 hours, proper exam conditions, shut the door, turn off the phone, no interruptions.
And the real value isn't just seeing, I got 80%. It's the deep dive after the mock exam, right?
Absolutely. That's where the gold is, that critical audit process afterwards. You need to identify every single question, where you hesitated, where you guessed, maybe where you just took way too long.
Pinpoint the shaky areas.
Yeah, the content areas that felt uncertain. But even more important, the sources stress analyzing your thinking process for those questions.
Not just what you got wrong, but why.
Exactly. Why did you pick that answer?
Mm-hmm.
Trace your logic. Did you misread the scenario? Did you default to your usual way of doing things instead of the specific BICSI standard? Did you get lost trying to find something in the manual? Understanding how you reached an answer, right or wrong, is how you sharpen your accuracy for the test format. It's about tuning your expert brain to the exam's frequency.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's really about refining the application. Which leads us neatly to the 5th and final step. Mindset, time management, and just execution on the day itself. The sources frame this as less about knowing more stuff and more about being in control.
Totally. It's the final piece. You've done the prep work, you've aligned your experience, you've mapped the manual in your head, practiced the scenarios, used those mock exams to find and fix weak spots in your process. Now it's showtime.
Game face time.
Pretty much. On exam day, it's about walking in with a calm, focused, strategic mindset. Like a consultant walking into a client meeting. You're there to apply what you know, using the standard framework. Confidence is key here.
Okay, so mindset sorted. What about tactics once the clock starts? Any specific advice there?
Yeah, the sources suggest a smart plan. First, if the test system lets you do a quick skim through all the questions, just get a feel for the landscape.
See what you're up against.
Right. Then, go for the quick wins. Answer the questions you know immediately, build some momentum.
Get some points on the board early.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Mark the ones that look tougher, maybe heavy calculations or complex scenarios that need more thought and plan to circle back to them. Don't get bogged down early on.
Smart time management.
Crucial. And another key piece of advice, trust your initial logical read of a question, especially if it feels like it aligns with the standards you've been studying. Try not to overthink or let test anxiety make you second-guess your experienced judgment, unless you spot a clear error in your logic.
Good advice. And the night before? Cramming or chilling?
Definitely chilling. Avoid the last-minute panic cram. You should be beyond that. Maybe a brief look at your notes on those few tricky areas you identified from the mocks, but that's it. Focus on getting good rest. Seriously, walk in there knowing your experience gives you a solid foundation. You belong there.
Okay, so let's quickly recap those 5 steps. For experienced pros tackling a DCDC. First, consciously align your real-world experience with the specific BICSI blueprint. Find those gaps.
Second, treat that DCDC manual like the reference tool it is. Know how to navigate it fast. Don't try to memorize it cover to cover. Build that mental map.
Third, master those scenario questions using that consult, justify, optimize framework. Turn them into structured problems.
Fourth, use full-length mock exams relentlessly. But focus the real effort on the audit afterwards. Analyze your thinking process, not just the score.
And finally, fifth, manage your mindset, control your time, and execute strategically on exam day. Walk in calm and confident.
Exactly. Look, you didn't just read about this stuff in a book. You've likely built data centers, run major projects, solved complex problems on the fly. These steps are really about taking all that incredible expertise and just packaging it correctly, proving you know it within the standardized language BICSI requires.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From learning to calibrating and demonstrating.
Mm-hmm. It's about getting the credential that formally recognizes the expertise you already possess and use every day.
Right. Which leaves us with a final thought for you listening. Consider all the deep data center knowledge you carry right now. How much of it is maybe implicit knowledge, the stuff you just do based on experience or maybe site-specific ways of working? And how much is explicitly tied back to industry standards like BICSI's? What's the most effective way for you to bridge that gap and translate your hard-won expertise into that standardized language? Something to think